Boston school officials are planning their largest budget figure in all time, an increase over last year's amount by 1.5%. To tell us about some of the gains and new resources is the Boston School Department's Chief Financial Officer, Eleanor Laurans. Thank you very much for being with us, Eleanor.
Thanks for having me.
Put this into context, Eleanor. The largest in all time sounds impressive, about 1.5%, saying, well, maybe that's more incremental.
The budget that we're asking the school committee to approve this year is a $48 million increase of what they approved last year. The numbers this year are a little confusing because we had a mid-year supplemental from the city where they added more money to our budget thanks to a new contract with the BTU. So the 1.5 that you're citing is without having any increases to wages. And payroll is almost $800 million out of our $1.2 billion budget. So that's a big part of it.
Now, of course, what's not new for me is I hear about the city putting in more money for education, and then I hear parents saying, what about the cuts and what about less money from the state? Is that happening again too?
Yes, well, we're really proud and excited about the budget we've put forth because we think we're making a lot of really impactful investments. We're doing that thanks to the support from the city, but as you mentioned, we're doing that in spite of a pretty challenging fiscal environment at the state level. The governor proposed his budget a few weeks ago, and it's frankly not good for Boston. The mayor used the word crisis to describe the state funding environment for the city. The bottom line is that Boston would stand to lose $17 million in net state aid.
Now, in an ideal world, that means more money follows the students to charter schools if they chose that particular option. But there's supposed to be a formula the state uses, and district school systems are not supposed to be totally punished for that. So how does that work out?
That's exactly right. When the state of Massachusetts set up its charter law, they acknowledged that there are transition costs. In fact, they put into law that it would be 100% of the first year and 25% a year for a number of years thereafter. And the state has just failed to fulfill its obligation of charter reimbursement funding for a number of years. In fact, under the governor's proposal, the total lost charter reimbursement for the city of Boston would be over $100 million in the last 5 years.
There are some areas where you are spending more money in the budget where you think it's especially needed, and there's one program for students of color. Talk about what that's going to do.
It's called Becoming a Man, or BAM for short. It's an intense counseling program for young men of color. It originated in Chicago, and the research has indicated the results are really amazing. So we are proud to be bringing it to more high schools this year.
What does that do for students? Because I know, I think part of it is that maybe you don't have the role models, you don't have the people around you to show that it's possible to advance to a diploma and then beyond that. How does it work exactly?
Yeah, it brings counselors into schools. Often, I think they're all men of color themselves. It creates really powerful peer connections, an environment for young men of color to feel supported and connected to others.
Another thing Superintendent Chang has been trying to do recently is more or less equal the playing field in that fierce competition for exam schools, and that is letting more students do advanced work or just fulfill their potential. Talk about that program and how your budget is going to advance that.
Dr. Chang launched a new initiative he calls Excellence for All. It's specifically targeted at 4th through 6th grades. We are in the second year of the rollout now, so we have 5th graders this year. We're proposing an increase to the budget so we can bring 6th graders into it next year. It's at 13 schools. It infuses even more rigorous academics for those students, as well as enrichment to surround the academic experience.
So you're raising the bar, but I guess you have more time with teachers working with the students to help them catch up, maybe?
Yeah, well, we throw a lot more into a traditional academic experience. We have STEM, science, technology, engineering activities. We have robotics and foreign languages, a real rich experience for our 4th through 6th graders.
Now, when I look at some figures here, I see that, there are two different ways to look at the budget. You look at the centrally controlled spending, you look at the school controlled spending. Talk about how you're playing that balance this time around.
Yeah, great question. This causes a lot of confusion, frankly, with our budget because of the way we report our budgets. But in a nutshell, we have about 2/3 of our budget, when you include the benefits for staff, are on school budgets. Those are the budgets that principals and school communities set and control. The majority of that other third, by the way, is still stuff you see when you walk around a school. Custodians, school buses, our special education staff, they just happen to sit on a central budget. Only about 6% of our spending is what you would consider traditionally central administration. So our big push this year has been to put more and more resources that can be more flexible in the hands of schools to make decisions that can be customized for their kids, their school communities. And we're specifically trying to drive those resources to the schools that serve the highest concentrations of high-need kids.
Now, of course, another formula that comes into play is that you have some schools, a limited number, of course, that have some enrollment problems. They're losing their draw, but they still have students in them, and they're being cut. And I imagine some parents, they're not happy with that.
Yeah. Weighted student funding, or WSF, is the system we use to figure out what schools get what. And we've been hearing that criticism over the last few years, and so we're making adjustments. This year's system looks a bit different than last year's. Not only did we pour more money in, but we also have a series of mechanisms in place to support those schools that might have declining enrollment. And those include soft landings, as we call them, to hold schools harmless for the first bit of enrollment declines, reserves that we keep on hand to make sure schools have what they need.
Of course, another struggle in the budget world is transportation. It's not just Mayor Walsh. People before him were saying, we got to get this under control. How's it going?
It's going well. We've had some progress. We still have work to do. This year, we had a great milestone. We were able to take 50 buses off the road. That's better for Boston's air. It's better for Boston's traffic. And we're working to make sure we can translate that into bottom line savings. Transportation costs have really escalated for the Boston Public Schools in the last decade. We had a 4 or 5 year period where the average annual growth was over 13% a year of our transportation spending. Was going up and up and up. We have contained that. We've tamed the growth in transportation spending, and now we're looking to even reverse that, to bend the curve and to reduce the transportation spending we have.
We should also mention that people want to study this and think it over. You've got a lot of information online, right?
Tons. We pride ourselves in being incredibly transparent. Check out bostonpublicsschools.org/budget, and there's a treasure trove of data.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Eleanor Laurans from the Boston School Department.